guys, welcome back to Remote Work Bay. I am here on episode 2 of my podcast with Athan Slotkin. Athan, welcome to the show.
Hello, Remote Work Bay. How you doing?
Good. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so my name is Athan Slotkin. I am from New York my whole life, although I've been in Los Angeles now for about 4 years or so at this point. And I spend my days these days working with entrepreneurs around the world in what feels like every industry you can come up with at times, working through business strategy, business plans, financial models, decks. Basically, I get to see a lot of cool startups in like every single capacity possible, and like work with awesome people from all over the world. And then I usually have some projects of my own that are existing too on the sides.
And I noticed in your Instagram, you call yourself a shadow CEO. Why is that?
Oh yeah. So, well, actually it was one of my clients that called it to me. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of this person who's behind the scenes. And I have to look at people's businesses from like the CEO level to figure out what to do. Kind of a co-pilot for founders and for entrepreneurs sometimes at various points. And so the concept of like shadow and being behind the scenes, it seems to make sense. It was a pretty smart idea. And I'm like, I'm going to take that. That makes a lot of sense. We'll run with that.
I actually really like that. I mean, you should coin that term.
Yeah, we should definitely.
I've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's literally exactly what you do as a strategy consultant.
Yeah, it's a strategy consultant for startups is what it is, right? It's like definitely the way to say it. You're absolutely right. But it does tend to be a lot of definitely strategy, business strategy, but like business plans and financial models and pitch decks and making sure that the underlying strategy makes sense and like telling that story and like positioning the business. So yeah, it's like strategy consulting for mostly for startups, although some are more developed businesses too. That comes up.
Right. And so just to give us like a little background, I've known Athan for, a couple of years now. And I know from like the very first day I met you, you were working remotely. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's been a while at this point. It takes a very special person who's an extremely not good corporate citizen to work remotely early on. That's the formula that you really need. No, the joke is, so even before I was in Los Angeles, like 3 years prior to that, I actually joined a company, which was a corporate, but I was working remotely there, right? It was like kind of the start of when that was kind of becoming a thing. And like, this happened to be an organization where it worked and I liked what they were doing. And so I joined. And so that was for about 3 or 4 years. And then I kind of just broke off and wound up doing my own thing at that point. But even at that point, I was sitting at home working from, a portion of where we were living. This is in New York at the time, doing the remote thing. And you could very quickly see for anybody that's working remotely that it could become, whether you're introverted or extroverted, it could become a very lonely thing very fast, even if you have a team that you're working with too. And so now, everyone now that's forced to work remotely is probably experiencing some version of that. Like all of the good that you think comes with it, which is like the things that go into people's heads are like, I get to work in my pajamas, or, I get to have the TV on in the background, or whatever it is that somebody might be thinking, freedom, whatever. You definitely wind up missing being around people and like camaraderie and that whole thing. It definitely exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people, I've been doing this for over a decade as well. It's like a double-edged sword, right? I mean, yes, you get to make your own schedule, but I'm working around the clock.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you are too, because from what I recall, your team has multiple different time zones.
Yeah, they're all over the world. I mean, I think it's like, you're right. I mean, the issue that exists is that there's no like natural barrier that exists, right? Like you go to work and you go into an office, you physically go to work, you work on, as long as, is appropriate. And then you go home. And yes, sometimes, and most of the time, you're going to have work that you have to do at home. And like, that's pretty standard. But at home, there's like literally no barrier that exists, right? So what I found is like, sometimes that's just the case. And especially if you're an entrepreneur, the line's always fuzzy between like when you're working, when you're playing, that sometimes gets muddy. For me, I'm really good in the mornings. Like early in the morning, I'm up early every day, I exercise. I'm really good in the mornings. I can get really heavy stuff done, from 6 a.m. until, maybe 10, 11, maybe 12 or something like that. As the afternoon starts to come on though, I'm pretty mediocre at that point, to be honest with you. For those reasons, like I schedule meetings, calls, whatever it is, I try to make sure, are later in the day. It's no coincidence that we're talking about here right now, by the way. It's stressful, actually, in fact, in my case, to have meetings and calls in the morning because I know I'm losing like that heavy productive time and I need to get, some things done in the morning. So for me to create that like natural barrier, like you're talking about, what I do is like, I just recognize when I'm good and I'm not good. And it's not worth like grinding out an extra hour or a couple hours if it's going to be not good. You have to like recharge your tank and get efficient, effective hours out. So for me, like 5 o'clock these days in COVID world, I go outside and I take a walk outside, and then, maybe I'll do some like sporadic things on like my phone or otherwise. But my work days like are shifted. It's like 6 something until maybe 5 or 6 in various days. But if you try to catch me after then and try to have me do work, it would have to be something really important for it to happen at that.
Right. I think it's so important to find those hours that you're most productive, right? And like focus then. I'm the total opposite.
You're the opposite. I was going to say.
I'm like, I have like engineer hours where, I mean, I feel like my mornings, my late mornings, like from 9 to 12 are super, super, super productive. And then I'm like super unproductive all afternoon. And then all of a sudden I'm super productive again after dinner.
Yeah.
Like it's really strange. And I think what it is about the nighttime hours for me is that, no one's online. No one's online, everyone's sleeping, and I could just focus. There's like no FOMO at those hours. But in COVID times, there is no FOMO at all, which is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
From a productivity standpoint,
yes.
It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being here after hours then.
No worries at all. It's just square in meeting and discussion hours.
For sure. So, I kind of want to pick your brain because of all your knowledge in the tech space. But like, how do you think the stay-at-home order is going to affect the tech industry as a whole?
Well, there's a lot of things that are happening there, right? I think let's take it from like a couple different angles. From like the industry angle, I think that's an interesting one, right? Because we've already seen that, whether we want to believe it or not, there's a lot of industries that previously were in an okay position that are rendered somewhat obsolete now, right? And like, I think the difference in opinion exists between like, are they just obsolete and temporarily on hold now, or are they like permanently obsolete and like this is going to be how consumer behavior, right? And like all the local businesses, or not all, but a lot of the local businesses would fall into that category, right? Like we're seeing the foundation of restaurants, fitness, et cetera, bars, like all those things kind of fall into that bucket. And then consequently, any derivative of that too, right? Like any tech startup that was actually servicing places like those, or similar consequence, right? You're attached to an industry that may be rendered obsolete to some extent. If nothing else, there's a big shift that's happening in terms of like the kinds of industries that people are touching right now. And I think from like a mindset standpoint, I see like two ways to kind of think about it, which is like, one, there's some short-term opportunities, hustler, entrepreneur kind of ideas to be able to capitalize right now and provide a service that's of use. The common one that people have been seeing has been like creating like sanitizer, or like hustling masks, or like, you've seen people do stuff like that, whether you're on board with the ethics or not, separate question, right? But like, as an example, there's been like the short-term things that may or may not sustain, but then there's some people thinking about like what industry is actually going to sustain into the future, right? So for instance, I think a lot of people believe that fitness is going to shift for the foreseeable future, right? And it's not likely to go back to tons of people packing into gyms, right? So therefore, like fitness tech is something that a lot of people are latching onto all of a sudden because it's super relevant. So that's like the industry side of things. And then I think the other thing that's interesting is when you have a recession like this, right? And like a lot of people are laid off, or people they know are laid off, or they're furloughed, which I don't think is a term that existed before 2020 for whatever it's worth. I still don't even know what it means. All these people,
I guess, reduce in pay, or
I don't know.
Put in standby.
Yeah, exactly. Standby. So, like all these people, and the people who have seen those people were friends, family, whatever else, right? I think when you already had like the formula that existed, where you have like gunslinging, anti-corporate, anti-entity millennials, and Gen Zers that already existed, right? Let alone now when people are, in unfortunate positions, they're losing jobs, et cetera. And there's a ripe opportunity with like a clean canvas. You're going to see more people probably enter entrepreneurship. You're going to see happen who are going to try to break off and do things. And then on top of it, you have like the digital world, as that exists. You have all these tools that exist. Instagram is one, but then there's all these like management tools, course tools, like you name it, that enable people to start their own business and whatever it is that they're good at. It's like there for the taking. Plus you can freelance, right? Like there's no need anymore for it to be the case. And I think with corporations anyway, they're already shifting to like more of adapting to the freelance economy to begin with, right? So you just have this like perfect convergence of things that I think is just going to create a lot more people being entrepreneurs and like working for themselves and doing that kind of a thing.
How about all of these companies, like the hospitality, travel companies? Do you think we're going to have a rebound in 2021? Where do you see these companies going? They're just like laying off people, work at like left and right.
Yeah, I mean, well, they're laying off people because like they have no choice, right? Right now, they have to protect cash and they need to protect their books. And so like obviously that's what they have to do. But like between you and me, we have two people who are certainly voting for everything turning back to normal, because we certainly wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation right now, probably under normal circumstances.
Or I
As
would be on
easily.
an island somewhere else having
Yeah, exactly. More like that. I don't know. Like I tend to be like on the further end of the spectrum there, where I think it's going to take more time for things to get back to normal, to be honest with you. I don't think the concept of people, I think there's a couple issues. One is I don't think the concept of people packing themselves into closed spaces for extended periods of time with, what they perceive to be bad air circulation. I don't think people are rushing to do that right now, right? That's why you're seeing like a lot of localization of travel. And I think that's going to persist to some extent. But I think the fallout from that is when you have less people who are taking flights, like airlines, let's just talk about airlines for a second, right? They're a scale play. Like they don't make a lot of money historically. Like they make money on volume and like filling at 100% capacity, right? And as they can't do that because not as many people are keen to fly, all of a sudden they're going to have to charge up the people who are very keen to fly, many of whom probably have to fly. Like they absolutely have to or really want to go somewhere and therefore will pay whatever for it, right? So I think we're likely to see like prices on flights certainly increase. On the other end of the spectrum, it's really interesting, right? I don't think in the same way like people are going to rush to hotels, to be honest with you. I don't think that's like the most exciting thing for people right now either. So I think the whole idea of like, I think Airbnb and those players are in a pretty good position right now, to be honest with you. I just think like the flow patterns of like where people are going, it's going to be a lot more regionalized is what it is. But like, I think a lot more people rush to an Airbnb, in my opinion, than they're going to like a packed hotel, for instance. Even if they can like put all the cleanliness and all that good stuff on top of it, it's still like a packed facility. It's much like what we're seeing in cities. Like people are a little bit migrating out of cities because they don't want to be in big apartment buildings that are high rises and whatever. There's some of that too. So I don't know. I'm on the end of the spectrum though. What do you think is going to happen? What's your opinion?
I'm already seeing a trend in like staycations, like we're talking about. So I think Airbnb is definitely gonna have a rebound there. I know they cut like 35% of their workforce because they had to, but I don't think home sharing is gonna go away. And it's similar to what you're saying. People are perceiving nice houses and like remote destinations to be a little bit more safe and than being in like a high rise in the city. I think travel will rebound. I think it's gonna shift and change in the next 2-3 years. And the players that can stay and stick around and pivot will stick around until the end. But I think we're going to be losing a lot of these travel companies and just a lot of businesses in hospitality if they can't hold on and they're not getting these government loans. It's going to be very, very difficult. Yeah, it's really
That's a
sad.
little bit too, right? Because like the choice that we had previously, like the options that existed made it nice because not only did you have options, but like they put some pricing pressure on each other, right? So you had good choice at like reasonable prices. Now all of a sudden you're going to have a consolidation. So prices are going to be higher. People can't travel as frequently as a result of it. Like, I don't know. I just hope it like very rapidly gets away from that, right? And it gets back to like, I hope people feel comfortable at some point soon to be able to travel. I mean, self-admittedly, like we were talking about it before, like I'm nervous right now. I'm not the most comfortable traveling and I'm usually on the road always. But I'm hopeful it'll be good soon.
I know. I really hope so too. And I mean, like with that being said, I mean, I wanted to ask like a sub question. What do you, when we're in a downturn economy or a recession, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurial minded folks come up with great ideas, right? Like from what I understand, like Airbnb started in 2007, 2008 during the recession, right?
Makes sense.
What do you think are some of the startups that will come out of this recession that we're in?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
I'm like, if anyone would know, you might.
That's a really good question. I do think you have to look at like consumer trends that are happening right now. So like think about how your life adapted and I think map it to that to some extent, right? So like I think like we were talking about fitness, I think I think there's going to be a large migration to people doing fitness at home and things like that, even beyond, let's just say things return semi to normal at that point. I think this is going to sustain to some extent. And so like that is going to be a very interesting category. And for me, like I look at that, we saw like the acquisition of Mirror recently, right? As an example, and there's Peloton and all these other guys. There's the apps that exist as well. I don't know, me personally, like I work out like most days of the week, if not all. I still don't feel like my need has been perfectly met there, to be honest with you. And I'm probably not the only one that feels like that. And if that's the case, there's obviously then still people who can fit in the market at that. It's a very big industry. So there's certainly that. The concept of, so everyone was previously eating out, right? And love to go to restaurants. I don't think people ever want to like get rid of that necessarily. I'm not suggesting all the way to the extreme there. Mm-hmm. However, people have gotten used to this idea of like being at home and cooking at home and things like that. So I think this like premise of platforms that give you some kind of unique experience that may be at home, I think might be interesting as well. Because I think people are going to be a bit more used to that kind of concept, I think. And that just doesn't mean cooking yourself. That means also like having people maybe coming to your home, like some platforms that already did exist that were doing things like this. Like Airbnb certainly has experiences, because I know we're talking about them. And there's a platform called If Only that does something like that. I mean, all these platforms where you can get these people, to come over and share their expertise. And then on the digital side of things too, I noticed in my space, here's a funny comment that exists, but like, I think it's a pretty good proxy for what's going on. People are kind of cooped up at home and they're looking for things to do or learn or ways to connect with their family, or frankly, just looking for like some better entertainment idea at this point. Because there's only so many times you can go to a drive-in movie at this point. And like the kinds of things they're looking at are, there are these course platforms that exist, right? And so in my case, interestingly, like 5% of my time always, I actually teach poker. I usually pick up like a few students at a time only. I used to play poker professionally before all this stuff. And I don't have enough time to play, to be honest with you, but I always like staying attached to it and having a few students, especially now with recession. People might not want to pay for things like that because it's not the least expensive thing ever, to be honest with you. And I've had just a flood of people asking for that, for like poker coaching specifically.
How do people find you?
I have like some places online that I'm like, my profile's up and things like that. But I was surprised at that, to be honest with you. I thought people would be like protective of money right now, especially because people are losing jobs, things like that. And it hasn't been the case when you really think about it, right? Like people aren't going out and spending money on restaurants, really. They're not spending money on entertainment, right? Like people's expenses are somewhat limited right now, right? So there's only so many things you can do. And so I think the entertainment side of things and entertainment from home is definitely gonna press up. When you think about like concerts also, because I know you like, going to concerts and things like that. It's not that those are going to go away, but like for the foreseeable future, people are not going to pack themselves in. So you've seen probably like digital platforms where people can actually view concerts from home, and then like AR and VR comes into it and like physically making it seem like you're actually experiencing concerts live. That's certainly going to be like anything that, all these things that are like replacing things that previously people did, but in this new form, I think is really what's going to be hot these days, and like what is already hot as we're seeing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think what's interesting is I have a lot of friends that are in e-commerce space. So they're either like, they either sell something or they're like, they're selling software for e-commerce. And interestingly, in the last, 4 months of quarantine, they've seen sales go up. Sales, because I think, like you said, people are bored and they're sitting around at home. But also we have to remember we have that stimulus. So people, like, we really haven't felt like the real weight of the recession yet, because I believe the stimulus supposed to end this month, end of July, right? And at that point, I think in the next, Q4 this year, we're really going to see like the real effects of all of, 42 million people that
a lot of people
filed for unemployment. Isn't that more than like the last like recession we had in like the really, really bad one in 1920s or something like that?
It's
pretty crazy.
I mean, I don't even know if we had 40 million people in the U.S. at that point, but yeah, no, I'm joking.
Yeah. I mean, it's that. I mean, like the percentage, the ratio.
It's a lot of people.
Right. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens at that point. Like I also have a lot of friends that are in, entertainment. They're yoga, circus teachers. They're aspiring actors, actresses. Yeah. They're actually making more money on unemployment.
Oh, yeah. Well, that I think is an interesting topic, to be honest with you, because and controversial, and I may have a slightly controversial opinion there, but I don't know.
What's your opinion? What is your opinion on this?
I don't know.
Because people aren't going back to work. That's the issue.
That's my my opinion really is like, you've seen this before, like there's other things that show an example like this, like the marginal tax curve that's existed, where like at certain points in like the tax curve, people are literally not incentivized to work more because their net pay is identical whether they work this many hours or they work this many hours. It's really identical to this. So like if you're
Right.
trying to recover the economy in this case and like make sure, you know, there are more jobs, and jobs are a function of like how much productivity and output we produce, right? If people aren't working, we don't produce output, therefore jobs aren't, it's not going to exist, right? So I don't know. I don't love that idea, because you're giving. I always believe in incentive systems. To be honest with you, if you're incentivizing people and you're giving them the options, don't work and collect the same amount of money, or work and collect the same amount of money, most people are going to take the don't work and collect the same amount of money option. To be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of it. To be honest with you, I think there's like incredible people that are out there that are capable and creative, and I think even though it's uncomfortable now, a lot of people have had to reinvent themselves in some capacity before, right? And so I know that's not comfortable. Like it's not like, we have to be empathetic to that, right? Because times change and things change, and like we've all had times where we wanted to adjust or we had to be introspective about it. It's uncomfortable at times, but who better to do that than creatives, if anybody, right? Like these are people who are by definition that, as an example, and there's plenty of other people who would fall into that category too. I don't know. I like people having to be motivated to be able to thrive, and I think everyone's capable of that. To be honest with you, it's just about adapting to the times, and being an entrepreneur is what it is. Which, by the way, is everybody, right? Like that's a definition that like I feel like is, or a word that's like picked out for certain people, but anybody could be that. You know, it's just about hustling. You know?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, I like anything about the stimulus. It seems kind of strange that they selected one number, which is $600 additional a week, right, for everyone in this country, right? Someone that lives in San Francisco, that 600 is going to go like it's going to go like literally nowhere, versus someone that lives in, say, like the middle of Ohio, right? Like it's going to be, it's just so different, right?
Yeah.
Depending on where you live, what you do, what you made before, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think they should have had some type of like progressive stimulus system.
Yeah, I like the fact that it backed people, and like people had like a bit of a landing, but there has to be a transition that exists that like gets people back to it for everybody's sake. It's not just for like one may hear that comment and think like it sounds like a brash comment or something. It's not. Like it's for everybody's sake. We need to be able to do stuff and produce stuff. By doing that, that creates more jobs and protects everybody. It's what it does at the end of the day. So I agree with you. But what we're also seeing, as I'm sure you've seen, is like everybody, or a lot of people, are migrating out of cities at this point, right? And so now all of a sudden, because you can work remote, because that's become a thing, you know, hence remote work pay, you know, people can migrate out of cities, and then they can afford to pay less rent and have a lower cost of living as well, right? So there's some of that happening too.
Yeah,
I don't know what to make of that, to be honest with you, being a very city centric person, but it's definitely a trend.
well, I actually have a bunch of friends that live in San Francisco and have moved down to LA during this whole quarantine period,
Oh,
because
interesting.
why pay, right? Why pay 30-40% more?
Yeah, by the way, if we have any viewership that's not in San Francisco or LA or New York or something like that, they're going to hear you and they're going to be like, "What are you talking about? Move down to cheaper LA." That's the suggestion.
Crazy. I mean, LA is not cheap. Let's just be
No. But in
LA is
comparison,
not
San
cheap.
Francisco,
Like, San Francisco is probably the most expensive city, maybe
yeah,
outside of Manhattan,
yeah.
in this country, right? I mean, a 2-bedroom apartment will go for like over 4 grand,
Yeah,
5 grand,
it's crazy.
like that, something ridiculous, right? Whereas you can get a 2-bedroom apartment in LA for, say, three, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's still expensive, but when you add all those months up, you're actually saving quite a bit of money.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think about, companies? Like, do you think they're going to be shifting towards a more partial or even, full-time remote structure after this whole quarantine period?
There's like a philosophical question there, and a employee satisfaction question. I think that exists there too. There was a quote yesterday from, who was it from? I forget who it was from. It was one of the bank CEOs, basically saying that basically there's benefits to working together in a physical place, and it was kind of loose, to be honest with you. It wasn't like an in-depth quote, and I'm sure there's more to it, to be honest. But I mean, I think that stands true, right? Like being able to be physically in a space with energy, with whiteboards, and being able to ideate and develop, like there's value to that, right? So to some extent, I still think that's going to be something that's needed. But then the other thing that's almost more important than that is like, the same reason why even before this, like tons of snacks got piled into random offices, right? Was to give employees incentives that made them happy, to make them work and be happy with work as well, and like not burnt out. A lot of people, I think, like working in offices with people, and I think a lot of people are missing that right now. And so as long as you want to attract and retain talent, you
Mm.
probably have to provide something that they'll want. The trade-off for that, of course, is if you don't have office space, you might be able to pay people a little bit more, and maybe they'll be happy then and not say anything. But there's some trade-off that exists there, and I think some people, even for a little bit of extra money, would prefer to have an office with people around and energy around and things like that, right? So, and especially off the back of this, like people might want something like that a lot too. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag at the end of the day. I think there's going to be maybe an offering that exists where companies offer work from home as, I mean, it's a good win-win, right? Because they can offer it as a benefit is what they can do and not have to pay any more to be able to provide said benefit. And they save money on real estate by doing that, right? So it's a good win-win that exists if they think that people will be productive. But I still think some people are going to want an office at the end of the day. So that maybe they'll do a hybrid model. Maybe you can work from the office, at least 2 days a week or something like that. And maybe work from home the rest of the time. And maybe something in that direction possibly. But again, that's probably a while out at this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's very circumstantial depending on the worker and what it is that they do, right? I mean, I have friends that love working from home because now they get to watch their kids grow up, right? Yeah. So that's pretty cool. But then on the other end, people are like pulling their hair out because they're like, I can't work because my kids are running around, right?
I've heard a lot of that.
Yes, I heard a lot of that as well. So it's interesting to see, where this is going to shift to, and like following a lot of the tech news. I know like with Facebook, Twitter, forgot maybe Lyft, or some of the like major players in the tech world are like allowing workers to work remotely until the end of the year. If not even longer. So it's going to be interesting to see what type of, like you mentioned, hybrids of this structure that these companies are going to shift to. And do you, with the startups that you work with, are they mostly remote? Are they in office? Like what are you seeing with your clients?
I mean, frankly, like a lot of the startups that I work with are like very early stage, right? So like this is like people in a pod is what they are, right? So it's not exactly indicative, but even the ones that are a bit later on, and most of them are remote, completely remote, and I think remote for the foreseeable future, to be honest. I mean, I think like the split's going to exist, which is like some people are going to want to be in an office, but then those who don't, what they're probably seeing is they're probably looking at it and saying, I can work remotely and I can now live from wherever. So it's not like I could just work remotely X days a week and have to go into the office, but I still have to live in the expensive place. I can now go move to wherever that's a lot less expensive, enjoy my lifestyle because I don't mind. I don't miss being in the office necessarily. And at least we've adapted to it at this point. And so I don't know, you may just have like two kinds of employees that exist, right, in the future. And you just have to cater to both of them, and while somehow keeping team cohesion that exists at the end of the day too, right? So, and I think both people are making trade-offs, right? Like the person who's in the office is making a trade-off from like a little bit of freedom. The person who's remote knows that, like, I hate to say this, but like politically it may not be as good of a decision, right? Because they're not physically in the office and showing face and things like that. Therefore a little bit out of sight, not physically there for discussions. I don't know. There's a trade-off that I think everyone's going to make, but there may be just like two segments possibly. Two main segments that exist in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see, where it goes, because now most companies know that most of their workers can work remote. They had to. So it's I think that there's gonna be a lot more people working from home, or at least companies allowing people to work from home, maybe like you said, a couple times a week.
Yeah. I think it kind of self-selects, like in your experience, like you were saying, we had to get used to working from home and like into our routine, whatever. And maybe it works for us now because it's been like 10 years for you and 7, 8 years, whatever it is for me too. And it works. But I think there's some people that they just don't like it and it doesn't fit. They don't feel good or they get too distracted or whatever else it is. And I think probably just going to self-select a little bit too, right?
Oh, I really think so. I mean, I have friends that have already started sneaking back into the office because there's no one there, right? It's just because they have their full setup in the office, and it's just there's no distractions there, right? And I think it really is like a circumstance. It really is like depending who you are, like what your circumstance at home is, and if you have even the space to be productive at home, right? Like, I think you and I are pretty lucky that we have I mean, we don't have kids. It's really easy to be productive, right? But for someone that lives in, say, like a 1-bedroom apartment with their whole family, like that's probably, I can't even imagine. I actually can't even imagine how they would work remotely.
Yeah. Like you said, that both positive but then also complaint of like not being able to get anything done has been a common one lately. I don't know. Maybe there's a solution that exists there. That's for the taking for an entrepreneur. Maybe I'm
Exactly.
sure there's something there.
There has to be something. I'm sure if I Googled it, there's like, working on a startup for that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I mean, that's a ginormous problem that exists from every angle. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, with that being said, I know you used to work a lot in co-working spaces.
Yeah.
What's going on with co-working spaces now? Are they still around? Are people still using them? Like, do you know anything about that? Sorry.
I mean, last I checked, spaces that I use, they're still active right now. They're open right now.
Have they been open the whole time?
No, not the whole time. I think it's only been the past maybe month or so, from what I can tell.
Got it.
But I cannot imagine, like, I don't see a lot of activity on like the apps, and I can't imagine they're very jammed right now. I had a call with a client, and they happened to be in one of the co-working spaces. And I think they were the only human in it. I don't know. It felt like they were the only person in there probably. So, I mean, they're open, but I can't imagine too many people are rushing back to be in like confined space with a lot of other people. But then again, like LA, I'm sure anywhere that's the case, even in New York where it's like been tempered a little bit, it seems like. But LA, where it's even a bit of a hotbed too, like probably even less so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering like how that business model is considering, people probably don't want to be in a space where people are going in and out of, especially in an office building that like a lot of these WeWorks are in.
Yeah.
I haven't really done the research myself. I was just wondering if you happen to know anything about, the co-working model.
I haven't looked at the numbers in a while and what's going on. It's a little bit tough to tell in some cases, right? Because it's not public information. But I think that model is a hang on and make it model. Like it's very well poised for the future world, right? Because if you and I are discussing here and saying people are not going to be going back into offices, at least to the same extent before, they're still going to want to work somewhere sometimes, right? And so the co-working model made sense even before this happened, let alone now. I think it'll make sense. I think it's just a question of like, can they hang on until when things are back to semi-normal and people can actually come back in, right? Because right now, you're just going to have nothing but people canceling memberships, right? Like, why are they going to pay for a space that they can't even use if it wasn't already done, right? So I think it's a better model, to be honest with you. It's just a question of do they hang on?
Yeah, I think so too. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially for those of us that have been remote for so long. Like, when we do travel, it's like sometimes we want to be working out of a co-working space, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering like where all these, digital nomads are going to go when you do travel and work. Are there places that you work from? I mean, outside of co-working spaces?
Once in a while I'll work in like a coffee shop or something like that.
Right.
But I mean, I still think that the co-working spaces, like whenever you have a model, not always, but usually when you have a model that clearly makes sense into the future and like is better positioned than maybe traditional office space, let's say, right? As we like get out of this pandemic at some point, usually there's like investor money to be had because they see the same trends that are happening and see it's going to be a fit. Plus, like you have with several of the co-working spaces that exist, like you have brand equity that exists already, right? People are familiar with them. So usually when that's the case, like there's investor capital to be had so they can withstand it and then come out the other side and actually be positioned really well for post-COVID life, let's call it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think they'll hang on, to be honest with you. I mean, I still think it's a better model than traditional office space where, I mean, we've already seen that, right? Like for a while at this point, even before COVID, right? Like half of commercial spaces were empty, right? And depending upon where you were, and this is just making it even worse, right? Like local businesses going out of business, offices becoming more obsolete. Like I think we all know that the commercial real estate model is getting a little bit upended now. And, maybe what happens is they migrate more to a semi-residential model or a hybrid model or something. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but I don't know. I think the co-working model is better positioned than like the traditional office model, if nothing else.
True, because I mean, come 2021, we're probably going to have a significantly larger number of remote workers that will probably need that space.
It's already bubbling up with like the freelance economy, already pushing up even before this happened, right? Now you've got, 30, 40 million people who are bound to become freelancers, corporate employees who now feel comfortable working from home. Yeah, it's no doubt where it's going to be headed.
Yeah, for sure.
Or alternatively, you're going to get very inexpensive commercial real estate rent as well. I guess that's the other option that could exist, and it could level out. But I still don't think it's what people want at the end of the day. I think they'll probably want more code.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that space. Considering we use co-working spaces everywhere. Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about like how you work remotely when you're traveling? Like outside of COVID, like how do you look for a destination to travel to? Well, where's the first place you're planning to go when
that's a good question. I mean, I haven't been back to New York in a while, to be honest with you. As silly as that sounds, so like all family, friends are there. Like that would be a good one. But other than that, I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I have some friends in like Eastern Europe, in parts of Africa I wanted to get back to, or wanted to get to.
Yeah.
Usually we have a trip at the end of every year, like in that direction, like way east at that point. So it would be nice to just get like way away from here. Would be nice. Whatever the farthest point is away from here, it would be nice. Maybe not again that like 19-hour Johannesburg flight. I'll probably avoid that one because we've been there too many times, but something that's away from here would be really nice at this point, where it just feels different, maybe with a little bit of different feel to it, different smells, different everything would be good. It kind of doesn't matter is really what I'm saying at this point. Like pick a place, and as long as it's new, and let's go.
Are you stir crazy yet?
A little bit. A little bit. For you and me, it's not that different, right? Because we still work from home anyway, so we're kind of lucky in that sense, right? But it would be nice to travel. It would definitely be nice to travel. It would be nice to play more sports, which you can't really do right now. That would be nice too. But that's about it, right? Like in the scheme of things, not giving up that much, and travel happens soon again, so it's not so bad.
That's true. I mean, how are you getting your workouts in, by the way? I wanted to ask that.
So every other day, yeah, I have to do it, by the way, because if I don't do it on the days that I don't exercise, I feel like just mentally stuck. Like I can't think straight. Like I literally can't do anything. And for me, I've wrestled with this one too, by the way, which is like as an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
Working out in the morning, working out later in the day. When's the best time to do that? I know some people that are just fluid about it and can adapt. I'm not good enough to do that, I guess. So these days, like I work out in the morning is what I do, because I get it clear. It gets me in like a good headspace, and then I can just kind of go attack. I've had other times, by the way, talking about like work from home, entrepreneurial kind of things. I've had other times where I've wrestled with this, and I've worked out more in the afternoon because my morning time is so valuable that I've had times where like I work out in the morning and all I'm doing is like thinking about all the things that I have to do, and it stresses me out. But these days it seems to work well in the morning. I just get up a little bit earlier. And let's see, usually 3 days a week I'm going for a run outside. And I use one of the aforementioned apps with like a run coach / guider, that kind of a thing, basically.
Oh,
and then it's cool. It like emulates the indoor like treadmill classes that exist, where you have a coach in there and they kind of like guide you, that kind of a thing. Kind of emulates that. And then 2 days a week I'll do a yoga class, and then maybe go for a walk on the other day, and that's kind of it. So it's good, but normally speaking, that would look like some sports and a mix of things. And, I think I belonged to like 2 or 3 different gyms before, not because I was a weights person, but I play basketball in one place and running class in another place and that kind of a thing. So it's definitely changed. I don't know.
I miss people. I mean,
Yeah.
I not only take classes on Zoom, but I teach, right? And so it's so, I mean, it's different on both ends, right? Like as a student, as you know, it's just not the same when a teacher is not adjusting you and they can't physically see you, right? And like give you that personal attention, right? But as an instructor, same thing, right? Like when I'm all the way back there doing whatever I'm doing, I literally can't see the screen.
Yeah.
You have to like scroll through because there's so many little boxes. And at that point, like you can't really demonstrate, because if I'm
there's totally an opportunity that exists here. Like in example, you're saying, like when I'm running to somebody who's just talking generically to me, right? Like they have no idea where I am or what I'm doing or anything else. There's nobody else in the class that like, is in, whatever mediocre shape you think you're in, like in the same space, and therefore you feel motivated to do whatever you're doing, right? That doesn't exist, right? There's no same people that you get to see, things like that.
Right.
There's totally an opportunity just to create a better, more dynamic virtual workout experience, right? Like Peloton did a pretty good job, but even theirs is not like physically, at least from what I know, like actually interactive during the classes fully. Like I know it's a little bit interactive back and forth, but you can't like fully see all the people that are there and like have a thing that goes on. I don't think Mirror at all is like that. None of the apps I don't think are like that. So there's an opportunity.
Oh, and there's also only a certain demographic of people that can afford the Peloton.
That too.
I mean, that thing is what, like $5,000, $6,000?
Yeah. It's not cheap.
Yeah, it's like, so I mean, it's if you're in like the top 5%.
Yeah, but even you're right. But even like also the purely digital products that exist, they don't have like hardware, right? Like the Peloton or the Mirror, which are less expensive, right? Which are $10 a month or whatever.
Yeah.
Same thing. Like there's an opportunity there for a product that most people can actually afford and take on. in both cases, I agree with you. I think there's like a really good opportunity there to create something awesome that, can, in the future steal share from gyms and what they were doing, but create an experience that people like and is what they want for their lives and make them feel connected to people. I think that's like the gap that exists. Like, as you think about the theme that exists with all these things, it's like people want to feel like some shell of what it was before, and they want to be connected to people is what it is, right? So like any solution that can help them have some of that is better than what exists.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's tons of entrepreneurs scouring to create those apps or create those businesses to help bridge that gap.
For sure.
I know.
I think we're going to see some cool
I'm
things.
excited to test them and use them. So
Exactly.
wherever you are, please ping me.
Yeah, exactly. If you're listening to this video, I have tapped out of run classes, and frankly, I don't like being talked to like a robot at this point. So if you can please reach out, that would be nice.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I'm right there with you. Well, I mean, okay, so last question. I guess like, do you have any other tips or tricks for people that started working remotely? Massive population of people that just started doing this for the first time a couple of months ago, and I know they've had a lot of questions. They're struggling about productivity. Like, how do you stay connected? Like, do you have some tips for people that just started doing this?
Buy a comfortable chair. That's a start.
What are you sitting on?
Yeah, it's an okay chair. It's like a mesh back.
Okay. Oh yeah,
chair. It's not bad.
I like that.
Yeah, it's got a headrest, which I don't even think anybody uses it, but whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think being introspective, like it's very easy to read articles online and hear prescriptive things that you think apply to everybody, but that's not the case, right? Like instead, when you go into an office, you're a little bit forced in to some extent. Like you're forced to work 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 9 to 7 or whatever your office culture dictates, right? And that's what it is, right? And you have to work around that. In this case, like to some extent with your team, like, yeah, you have to have some overlap, right? So there's no avoiding it. But I think you have to be really introspective about like what schedule works for you and thinking about like your productivity as well. The one other thing that I do sometimes too, periodically, like usually every 2 or 3 weeks, I have like a recurring reminder on my tasks. I actually look back at my calendar and audit how my calendar went basically, and like where I actually was effective with time, what time was being wasted. Not because you like necessarily need like an explicit action right from there. Like it's not you can always like do something right away. However, like when you're considering what meetings you're going to take on, things like that, it's going to be planted in your head at that point, and I think you're going to react differently off of that, like naturally change your process. So I think sometimes like putting a reminder on. And maybe other people can remember it more frequently than me, but I don't remember it. So I put a reminder on for every 2 to 3 weeks. I look back at my calendar. I see what meetings I had. I look at like which ones were effective, which ones were not as effective, and I change my process off it. Mentally, I just change my process. And I do that I don't want to do it like always. Maybe even 2 to 3 weeks is like pretty frequent and maybe too frequent, to be honest with you. I don't think under normal circumstances I would do it as frequently because right now things are a little bit weird and a little bit more dynamic, right? If things are a little bit more level, then, maybe every couple months you could look back and see what you did and adjust. But, I think as entrepreneurs or remote workers, right, like you're constantly trying to figure out better, more efficient ways to do things, be it with process, be it with technology, be it with whatever tools, whatever. So for me, like I like constantly, every few weeks looking at that to just figure out how I can keep improving and like, being more efficient with my time, right? At the end of the day. Yeah.
Do you have someone that's accountable, or is it just you? Like you just have it all in your calendar and you like keep yourself accountable? I mean, do you see, benefits in having someone that maybe just is like a coach or mentor or someone to keep you accountable with all the things that you're doing, especially as an entrepreneur? Like it's one thing to work remotely and work for someone else, but like as an entrepreneur that works remotely, that's even tougher.
I think it's like it's person dependent to some extent. I think some people will just make sure they get it done, but I think it's usually the mechanism why. Like some people need that as the mechanism to have like a coach or something like that, and that makes sense, and that's okay for some people. I think in my case at least, like I think what pushes me is one is I want to create impact, so that's part of it. So if I see the time ticking, I don't feel like that's the case. Two, I have to look at figuratively look at my team every single day. And basically they're all working and earning money and earning jobs because of the things that we do together. And the more I do, the more that creates for us to be able to do. And then everyone's happy at that point. It's also a little bit out of like paranoia, to be very transparent with you. This is a weird concept. I don't know if anybody's going to agree with this one, but at least it's how I feel about it. The weird concept is like with my team that works everywhere, especially in the freelance economy, there's a lot of value to giving individual people a lot of work rather than splitting the work up thinly amongst a bunch of different people. When you split the work up thinly amongst a bunch of people, you're competing for those individual people's attention, and you're going to lose because you're only giving them X hours of stuff a week, right? And they have plenty of other things that they have to pay attention to, right? So to some extent, I feel this like paranoia / pressure, to be honest, where I want to make sure my team always has things to do because I want us to be able to rise, and I want them to be happy, but also like it stinks to have to find new people, to be honest with you. And it's the worst. Like it eats up your time, and like you already know you work well with these people, right? And in both directions. So I like keeping everybody busy so that they have plenty to do and they don't have to worry about like, do I have to find things elsewhere? Do I have to find work elsewhere? It's like an easy win-win that exists, right? And so me seeing and communicating with them every day and knowing that, what we're doing together is like providing work for them, I don't know, that motivates me at least to keep pushing. So
it's like your workers keep you accountable because
they do. So, by the way, they'll also like nudge me and say, hey asshole, like, you dropped the ball on this one, right? Like, can you give us a response here already? I.e. like I'm the bottleneck, which I am frequently, right? So they'll do that too for whatever it's worth.
Absolutely.
So that helps if nothing else, but I also do feel the other thing too, where I do want to keep everybody busy and happy.
Right. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Athan.
For sure.
How do people find you?
Yeah, I mean, I think my Instagram's a good place. I mean, I put tips up constantly on there for entrepreneurs about how to think of things, sometimes in weird ways. Like I think about numbers a lot and how to quantify everything, maybe to a fault. And so I put lots of tips on there and like how to think about your business and your business strategy. So it's just my name. It's at Athan Slotkin is what it is. But on there I have like other tips and resources.
Text below as well. So
cool. Sounds good. It won't be hard to find me because there's not many other Athans or anything like that name really. But from there I have like resources that are on there too, like free resources and other things that are hopefully helpful for people to just succeed as entrepreneurs. So tons of stuff for everybody.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely drop your contact in the links below, and thank you so much for your time, and I hope you're staying safe.
Yeah, ditto.